Welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast, the podcast that helps aircraft owners and aviation businesses learn and understand the complex world of aviation insurance and risk management. From the basic principles of aviation insurance to risk management techniques and updates on the aviation insurance market, the Aviation Insurance Podcast is your guide to traverse the world of aviation insurance. Now, here's your host, Tim Bonnell.
Well, welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. And I was recently at the Aviation Insurance Association doing a presentation with a panel on the future of technology in aviation insurance. And one of those issues that I was touching on was the use of telematics. And I don't have an extensive background and experience in that, but it did lead to a conversation with a gentleman who has a lot of experience with telematics and how it can and could be integrated in insurance and aviation. And so I wanted to reach out and bring him on the show. We do have a lot of listeners that are aviation enthusiasts in general, but we do have a significant number of our audience are people in the aviation insurance industry as well. So I thought bringing on Danny Maco would be a really good use of the time of the show and the time of our listeners. And Danny Maco has a rich and diverse career in executive technology roles across various industries with a strong background in the gaming industry. Danny's experience has cultivated a deep passion for harnessing data and analytics to enhance business performance and elevate the consumer experience. So throughout the past decade, Danny has been at the forefront of the connected vehicle space and making significant contributions to this evolving field. His leadership roles within insurance companies like AAA have involved managing connected insurance programs and spearheading the development of innovative products, including connected home solutions, telematics, and usage-based insurance, which we'll talk more about all these things if you don't know what those words mean. So additionally, Danny has led InsurTech product organizations, specifically telematics service providers, or TSPs, which are responsible for creating cutting-edge products and platforms. These offerings are instrumental in enabling carriers to implement and execute their programs successfully. Currently, Danny is now on a mission to extend his expertise and leverage terrestrial telematics to revolutionize aviation and urban air mobility, also known as UAM use cases, particularly in the realm of the evtol-based urban air mobility. By applying his wealth of knowledge and experience, Danny aims to bring the valuable insights and advantages of telematics to the aviation industry, paving the way for exciting advancements in UAM. So Danny, welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. We're glad you're here.
Thanks, Tim. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, let's just start out. This word telematics may be new to some people. So what would just help us learn what is telematics or what are telematics?
Sure. So in the fleet and automotive space, telematics is basically the collection of data as you track a vehicle from point A to point B. That data can be collected through devices that are plugged into the vehicle or through a mobile app that's downloaded by the driver, or these days, even through connected vehicles that are connected to the internet directly. The data can be relevant to the performance of the vehicle itself. It can be route data for management of fleet vehicles and operations, or it can be data associated with driver behavior, particularly if that data is predictive of risk. These driving data are then sent real-time up into the cloud, where they run through algorithms that have been correlated to claims data. These algorithms then output safe driving scores, which are predictive of how risky a driver is.
Yeah, I think we've all probably seen some commercials from, auto insurance companies talking about this technology in general, right? So,
yeah.
So how then, that being one example, how are telematics currently being, used in recent years or currently in that general non-aviation property and casualty insurance space, and what are the benefits?
Sure. So in all states, with the exception of California, insurance carriers use telematics data to offer UBI, which stands for use-based insurance products. As you said, you've probably seen, or the listeners have probably seen commercials from Progressive Snapshot or Allstate DriveWise or Don't Mess With My Discount from State Farm. Those are all versions of UBI programs. The way they work is policyholders will generally opt into these programs they'll agree to plug in a data collection device into their car or download an app. Then they'll drive around with these devices and the sensors within the phone. Those will collect data associated with attributes that are predictive of risk, things like harsh acceleration, speeding, harsh braking, those types of things. And then in the initial period, the driver or the policyholder is granted a participation discount, usually around 5 to 10%. They will collect this data for over one term, and then they'll come up with a safe driving score. And if their score is a good score, then they will get a potentially higher discount ranging anywhere from 20 to 40%, depending on the carrier, upon renewal of their policy.
Yeah, so this basically offers, the opportunity for carriers to rate, the risk based on the driving data that they receive so that they can be more profitable. Is that kind of the idea?
That's exactly right. From a benefits perspective, for personal lines carriers, so carriers that insure drivers like you and I, the data is used to identify segmentation and to match segmentation to risk. Also, these programs benefit from what's called adverse selection, which basically means that when a carrier offers a UBI program, if a driver believes that they're a poor driver, they're highly likely not to join the program. Whereas a driver who is a very good driver thinks to themselves, well, I have nothing to lose. I want to get the discount, and they'll join the program. And as a result, those insurance carriers that have the UBI programs end up collecting all of the low-risk policyholders and drivers, while they leave the higher risk drivers for their competitors. Drivers also benefit, from a couple of ways. One, from a discount if they are a safe driver, but also all of these programs have a mobile application where you get feedback of your scores, not only as an overall score and how you're doing and how you're trending towards a possible discount, but also highlighting attributes that can make you a safer driver and a score on a journey by journey basis. And as a result, you can end up becoming you get the benefit of saving some money, but also you help yourself and your family stay safe. Also, fleet, in the context of fleets and commercial lines, similar benefits with respect to being able to quantify risk. But now also the fleet managers have additional tools to be able to manage their fleet operations, and they get feedback that they can provide to their drivers to lower the overall risk to the company. Fleet assets and routes can be tracked, as well as the location of goods being transported by the fleets. Also, regulatory entities, so the state DOIs and regulators, they benefit from the data to inform policy. In fact, you are starting to see a trend in many states where there's a leaning towards telematics, while there is a desire to potentially phase out some of the other traditional rating factors that are considered to be a little bit unfair, credit score and some others. OEMs, or the car manufacturers, Tesla, for example, can also use the data to build their own risk models, in some cases allowing them, like Tesla, to develop their own insurance products and quantify their own risk associated with the drivers of their cars. And then lastly, in the case of rideshare models, all the insurance and driver benefits remain, but also the passengers tend to benefit as well in the ability to quantify, have a driver score associated with their drivers, and be able to see those ratings and understand how safe, or select a driver who is a safe driver. And in doing so, that also helps with the passenger experience and help onboarding customers who might otherwise not be hesitant to take a ride share. Wow,
it's really amazing all the ways that's being used, and obviously there's a tremendous amount of benefits, and I'm sure there's resistance to that, from people. But just thinking about that, applying it to the aviation industry, would there be potential opportunity or benefits to be the same in the aviation side of the industry, or different?
Yeah, most definitely. Although I'd say overall we're in a very embryonic stage of aerotelematics, if I could use that term. In the aviation industry, there's a number of barriers to be worked through. In my area of interest, I basically put it in two different buckets. The first is the private pilot and personal aircraft bucket. There's a long history and legacy there. FAA, OEMs, and pilots may be relatively slow to adopt FDM or flight data management and tracking systems within these aircraft. Systems that do exist typically were designed around collecting data for safety or navigation or operations, not so much for data to be used for risk or for insurance. However, I do think that with the increased usage of mobile-based flight apps such as the ForeFlight, Garmin Pilot, Cloud Ahoy, those all provide opportunities to start collecting data that are relevant to insurance. The second bucket is related to what you mentioned earlier, the EVTOL and UAM use cases. Seeds seem to be germinating in this space already. Now I may mispronounce this, but I think it's AOI Nisei Dowa, which is a large Japanese insurance company. When they announced their investment in Joby, they expressed their intent to develop special products that were, quote unquote, similar to their telematics products, which is very encouraging. The advantages here is that it's totally greenfield. It can be built from the ground up. There isn't a lot of legacy that exists in this new space. There's also strong motivation to develop these platforms and capabilities because there will be brand new systems with new breed of pilots, pilot training and protocols that will be need to be modeled. Having a means to measure pilot performance and skills will be important to FAA regulators and certainly insurers. Pilot rating systems can help to onboard hesitant passengers, similar to the rideshare experience we talked about earlier, who are brand new to this experience because it's never existed before. Probably most significantly, in an absence of any historical data, insurance companies will lack risk models to apply to these new use cases, and therefore will likely set overly conservative premiums, which are going to drive up the operational expenses of a lot of these startups. So that's a pretty good motivation to start collecting data and leverage it.
Yeah, and for those listeners who may not understand what falls under the category of eVTOL, could you just quickly describe that for our audience?
Sure. So VTOL stands for vertical takeoff and landing. There are electric VTOLs, which is the eVTOLs, and then there are other VTOLs that use hydrogen and traditional fuels, et cetera. The eVTOL space seems to be most progressive and very active, associated with many of the new use cases that you may start hearing about. There's kind of a range between or spectrum from autonomous to piloted, and another spectrum and a range from basic drone capabilities, delivery, for looking at roofs, maintenance and support for infrastructure, those types of things, through to the opposite extreme of flying taxis or a flying rideshare model. And in between that spectrum are companies that are doing mid-mile fleet delivery or delivery of high-value goods like hearts and lungs and blood. And along that spectrum, there are use cases and OEMs or companies that are building these aircraft that are either going to be autonomous or piloted. So that's that, and the most dominant of those are all saying that they look to be operational by 2025, which is much sooner than I think most people, most of the public ever have thought would be the timeline.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of technology, all the AI, all this, a lot of massive movement in technology right now, and you just talked about some of it. But are there any other technologies coming down the pipes in the telematics technology space that apply to the aviation industry, and where do you think they will show up first?
Yeah, well, I think first, I do believe that a lot of the benefits that are inherent to and have been built up over the last 20 years in the automotive space are quite analogous to the benefits that will come forward in the aviation space. Insurance carriers will be able to quantify and model risk, particularly in market where specific aircraft model design, performance, and use cases will be both new and vary significantly. OEMs, manufacturers, will be able to build their own risk models to independently validate risk, possibly self-insure, or even decide to offer their own insurance products to their clients who purchase their aircraft. Supplemental telematics data is also useful in managing flight operations and measuring related risks in that area. Data modeling, particularly associated with autonomous flight use cases, is going to be very important, since kind of by definition, that model breaks the traditional model of more pilot training and experience equals lower risk, because there are no pilots. So they're going to have to collect a lot of data to start quantifying that risk. Freight, mid-mile delivery, and high-value goods delivery, UAMs use cases, they'll benefit when insuring not only the aircraft, but as well as the goods, just as terrestrial fleets do. Well-performing pilots will benefit from lower insurance rates, just like drivers do in cars. Personal eVTOL aircraft OEMs. Now, this is a use case where the manufacturers of the eVTOLs sell a eVTOL to an individual to use just as they would use their car to get around in their farm, to go across the bay and get to work, that type of thing. So using the data to help those buyers to become insured, and also as the eVTOL OEM, by collecting the data and your own risk models, you may be able to offer insurance as an additional revenue stream to your low-risk clients if you're able to measure such things. And then finally, OEMs can use pilot telematics scores and other data to help onboard consumers and develop the optimal passenger experience, since, again, many of these new flying taxi use cases, consumers will never have experienced before, and in any way, shape, or form that you're able to help onboard those customers, it's going to be helpful. To your question associated with what's coming down the pipe, I think of it in basically three different paths, independent paths. First is the OEM, so the likes of Joby, Air, Archer, Elroy Air, Jetson, and others. They'll begin to develop their own insurance relevant data architectures, their data science teams and models. But my sense is that most of them will not do so until their objectives of becoming certified and operational are achieved. It seems that there's a high level of priority on that, understandably. The second area is carriers. Some of them are already beginning to act. Global Aerospace is a good example. Nisei Doha, as I mentioned before, could be considered first movers. The obstacle here is that many of the insurance carriers probably will not move until they either verify demand or see that they're losing underwriting opportunities, or determine that a meaningful percentage of their book of business is being impacted. The third area I think that I actually believe will probably move fastest is what I call the future TSPs of aviation. In the terrestrial space, there are vendors that are called telematics service providers, or TSPs, and they basically, as vendors, build out these platforms, these algorithms, all of the technology the mobile apps, everything. They white label them and then they sell them to insurers who then turn around and deploy them in the market with their own branding as their own offering. Pilot apps and FDM platforms, as I mentioned before, like ForeFlight and Garmin Pilot, Cloud Alloy, the smart ones are going to realize that they're already in the aircraft. They're collecting lots of data and have a user interface with the pilot. So they're perfectly positioned to become future TSPs of aviation. One interesting note, that one of the biggest TSPs in the automotive space, a company called Cambridge Telematics, or CMT, is the TSP that IOE Nisei Doha uses for the their automobile telematics program. So be interesting to see what emerges there.
Yeah, and I've been hearing, certain jet owner groups that like owner single pilots that are starting to experiment with this technology to see how it plays out. And I know they would love to present, some of that data to the insurance industry. And so I guess that really, leads to that question you've kind of been alluding to, but how can these technologies be specifically used in the aviation insurance industry to improve safety and increase efficiency? If you'd boil that down.
Yeah, I think as in any environment where risk is inherent, the insurer's objective is to move away from the traditional models of reaction and remediation towards the ability to be predictive and preventative. The ability to collect data with the technologies we have now, build predictive models, best understand risk. It's all critical to obtaining that objective. So therefore, I think Aero Telematics has a pretty important role to play.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. There may be resistance from insurers, there may be resistance from operators or pilots, but ultimately, I think what you alluded to, what I'm taking away, because that's kind of one of the first thoughts I had, is that eventually, with the technology and the operational efficiencies, the risk portfolios and proactive risk portfolios that are able to be developed, people who have to kind of get on board or be left without business or paying much higher rates. So I think these are going to be a part of not only transportation by vehicle, but land, sea, and air, basically, in the coming years, and it's going to be something you kind of have to get on board with, or you're not going to be a player. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
I think you're absolutely right, and in fact, that ties very closely to exactly what we observed through the evolution of terrestrial telematics and automotive. There was resistance. The adverse selection drove the good risk to carriers. Then the tier 2s and tier 3s that were hesitant thought to themselves, oh my gosh, now we got to go build a UBI program because we got to collect this data. Otherwise, we're going to end up with all the terrible risk. And it allows for insurance companies in the automotive space have a lot of disruptive forces coming into play, in possible entrants like Tesla, possible entrants like Google, et cetera, et cetera. And so switching mindsets to truly being a part of the digital experience, consumer's digital experience, and owning the consumer is increasingly important. And I think that those same forces are going to come to bear here in the aviation space.
Yeah, it's scary and exciting all at the same time. And I think, in order to grow with it, you got to embrace it and be on board, at least at some level. And obviously, there's investments that have to be made and decisions that have to be made, but it's coming, whether we like it or not. And I know that, this topic in general, we could kind of sit here and talk, you have conferences probably on this topic, but I just wanted to give kind of an overview of what's out there, what's available, what can be done, how is this going to be, seen just in the aviation space in the coming, I would even say months, in addition to years. And so I appreciate, your time to share this and answer my questions on it. But anything we missed, any other final thoughts you'd like to share on this topic?
Maybe I'll add one cautionary tale from the automotive space. Progressive was the very first to develop telematics, probably about 20 years ago. They were the leader in that space. And Geico was the very last. They only embraced it about just a few years ago. In in the spring of 2022 at the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, Ajit Jain, he chairs the Berkshire's insurance operations. He was asked why they were so far behind Progressive in auto insurance growth and underwriting profitability, and he said, there's a number of causes for that, but he thought the biggest culprit, as far as Geico was concerned, was their late adoption of telematics technology. He said that they were finding themselves having to make very serious effort in terms of using telematics for segmentation and trying to match rate with risk and catch up with Progressive. And I do believe that there will be a point when we look back and see that there were similar opportunities and consequences in the aviation space for those carriers that decide to move, be first movers, and those that maybe wait a little too late.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot to think about. I know some people this is already on their mind. Some people this is a fairly new concept. Some people just running scared and want nothing to do with it. But I think it is, when we talk a lot about education and understanding, what's going on, what's coming. There's been a lot of technology improvements in aviation and in insurance. And so the aviation insurance industry can tend to be behind that power curve. So I think it's important to continually embrace what technologies are there, how can it improve safety and increase efficiency, but then also for insurance carriers, how could it increase profitability? Because, obviously safety is a win for everyone involved. And ultimately the profitability for the insurance companies is a win for everyone involved, because that is, means people's lives are safer and that premiums, typically will be lower than they would be. So, Danny, I just want to thank you, for taking your time today, sharing this information with us. I think it's a really good topic. I'm sure that I'll probably ask you in the not too distant future to come on and share with us, what's new in this space as technology, rapidly changes and advances and grows. And so, thank you for what you're doing in the aviation and space, and certainly in the telematics space. And we'll look forward to learning more as this grows. So, thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.
Well, I love to do so, and thanks so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed the conversation and look forward to where things evolve from here.
That sounds great, Danny. Well, thank you. And to our audience, that's all for this episode. Join us again next time as we continue navigating the waypoints in aviation insurance.
Thanks for listening to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. If you found this episode of value, please share it with someone who would benefit from this information. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast player so you don't miss any new episodes, and to help our show have more impact. This episode is brought to you by Aeris Insurance Solutions, your flight plan for navigating the turbulence of aviation insurance. For more information, visit airisinsurance.com. That is www.aerisinsurance.com. Disclaimer: these episodes are for educational purposes only, and due to the changing regulatory and legal nature of the business, some information may change over time. Having a well-educated and experienced aviation insurance broker on your team is an absolute requirement to success in business and for managing your aircraft and aviation business risks.